in April of 1817 that a local cobbler came upon a sight so out of place it must have seemed like a mirage. A young woman, disoriented and clearly in distress, was wandering alone. Her appearance was the first clue to her supposed origins. She had dark, flowing hair and wore a black dress with a finely worked shawl, but her head was wrapped in a turban, a style utterly foreign to the English countryside. She was exhausted, emotional, and, most intriguingly, she seemed to understand not a word of what was said to her. When she spoke, it was in a stream of incomprehensible syllables, a language that sounded like nothing the villagers had ever heard. Her strange predicament led her first to the local overseer, who was equally baffled. With no way to communicate and her story a complete mystery, she was passed into the care of someone with the resources and, more importantly, the curiosity to solve this riddle, Mrs. Worrell, the wife of a wealthy local magistrate. The Worrells were fascinated. They took the enigmatic woman into their home, Knoll Park, treating her not as a vagrant but as a perplexing guest. Communication was a pantomime of gestures and drawings. She would point to objects and offer a word from her strange vocabulary, and her hosts would supply the English equivalent. She sketched images on paper, pictures that hinted at a life unimaginably different from their own. She drew palm trees, exotic boats, and strange symbols, slowly building a visual biography of a distant world. It was through these interactions that the mystery around her deepened, carefully stage-managed to provoke maximum wonder. When offered a Bible, she recoiled in apparent horror, pushing it away as if it were a forbidden object. This single act powerfully suggested she was not from a Christian land, cementing her otherness. She further demonstrated skills that no proper English lady would possess. She was agile and fierce with a fencing foil, moved with a natural grace in the water, and even refused to sleep in a bed, preferring the floor. Every detail was a piece of a puzzle, and she was the one holding all the pieces. Her drawings grew more elaborate, depicting her worship of a deity she called Allah Ta'ala, a name that sounded tantalizingly similar to the Islamic Allah to British ears, yet was just different enough to be her own. The climax of this carefully constructed performance came when she was finally given a pen and paper. With all the gravity her situation demanded, she wrote a single captivating word: Caraboo. This was her name. Now, with an identity, her full story could unfold. She was Princess Caraboo from the island of Javasu, a faraway land in the Indian Ocean. Her tale was one of high adventure and tragedy. She was a royal who had been captured by pirates during a voyage, suffering greatly before managing a daring escape by leaping from the ship and swimming tirelessly to the English shore. The story was perfect. It explained her initial state, her foreignness, and her noble bearing. It was a narrative straight from the pages of a romantic novel, and the Worrells and their circle of influential friends were utterly captivated. The unknown woman was no longer a mystery to be solved, but a celebrity to be protected, a genuine princess in their midst. With her identity established, Princess Caraboo was no longer merely a guest at Knoll Park. She was its star attraction. The Worrells were not just her hosts, they became her patrons, utterly charmed and convinced of her royal pedigree. They provided her with a new, elaborately conceived wardrobe, blending elements from her descriptions of Javasu with Regency-era fabrics, creating a costume that visually cemented her status as an exotic royal. She was treated with a deference and curiosity befitting a visiting dignitary, her every whim and strange custom accommodated as sacred law. Knoll Park transformed from a quiet country estate into a stage for a continuous performance, with the Worrells and their social circle as the enthralled audience. The story was simply too sensational to remain confined to Gloucestershire. It quickly escaped the drawing rooms of the elite and exploded into the public consciousness through the newspapers. The press seized upon the tale, printing breathless accounts of the mysterious princess found wandering the English lanes. Princess Caraboo became a household name, the talk of not just the local counties but of London itself. She was a phenomenon, a real-life fairy tale unfolding in an age hungry for novelty and romance. Her portrait was even commissioned and turned into a popular print, making her face as famous as her story. The public was captivated, and for a few weeks, The entire nation was invested in the well-being and authenticity of this mysterious woman from a non-existent kingdom. To maintain this illusion under such intense scrutiny required immense dedication and creativity, and Caraboo delivered a masterclass in improvisation. She fully inhabited the role, building her fabricated culture with astonishing detail. Her language was not just a few words but an entire invented vocabulary, a consistent lexicon of sounds she used to name objects and express desires. Her religious practices became a part of her daily ritual. She would perform elaborate prayers to her god, Allah Ta'ala, chanting and moving with a solemnity that fascinated and convinced onlookers of her pious foreign faith. Her dietary restrictions were strictly enforced. She insisted her vegetables be cooked only in coconut oil, a substance then considered exotic in England, and she ate them with her hands or using a wooden spoon she claimed was from her homeland, refusing conventional cutlery. Her customs were a constant source of wonder. She demonstrated prowess with a sword, moving with an agility and ferocity that was both alarming and awe-inspiring. She rejected the comfort of a bed, choosing instead to sleep on the floor, and she was known to bathe in a local pond, a practice seen as both primitive and evidence of her noble, unspoiled nature. Every meal, every prayer, every interaction was a carefully curated piece of theater, designed to reinforce the incredible truth of her identity. For a brief, glorious period, the performance was flawless, and Princess Caraboo was, without a doubt, real. Despite the widespread belief, a low current of skepticism always ran beneath the surface of the Caraboo phenomenon. For every person enchanted by her story, there was another who found it a little too convenient, a little too perfectly tailored to the romantic and exotic tastes of the time. Sharp-eyed observers and learned men began to quietly question the internal consistency of her narrative. Was the language she spoke truly complex enough to be real? The sounds, while foreign, sometimes seemed to echo bits of Romany or other languages a traveler might have picked up. Did her descriptions of Javasu's location and customs align with known geography and anthropology? The island remained frustratingly unfindable on any map. The very details that made her story compelling were also its greatest vulnerability. It was a house of cards, beautiful but precarious, and it would only take one solid truth to bring it all down. That truth arrived in the form of a Mrs. Neal, the landlady of a lodging house in Bristol. As the fame of Princess Caraboo spread, her portrait was published in newspapers, making its way across the country. When Mrs. Neal saw the image, she did not see a mysterious princess from the Indian Ocean. She saw a former tenant named Mary Baker. She immediately recognized the distinct features of the young woman who had, not long before, rented a room from her and spoken with a perfectly clear Devonshire accent. The illusion was shattered in an instant. Mrs. Neal, realizing the immense deception taking place, knew she had to come forward. She contacted the Worrells, and the stage was set for a confrontation that would end the fantasy. The atmosphere at Knoll Park, once a place of wonder and hospitality, turned tense and solemn. The Worrells, feeling a potent mix of betrayal, embarrassment, and concern, arranged the fateful meeting. They brought Mary Baker face to face with the woman who knew her not as Caraboo, but as a struggling, ordinary servant. The confrontation was likely unbearable. Presented with someone who could attest to her true identity, the elaborate facade she had so painstakingly built became unsustainable. The weight of the deception, the exhaustion of maintaining the charade under the relentless pressure of fame, and the direct challenge of a witness from her past proved too much to bear. Under the pressure of this confrontation, Mary Baker's resolve crumbled. The regal posture of Princess Caraboo dissolved, and she broke down, confessing to the entire astonishing fabrication. Her real name was Mary Baker, and she was the daughter of a poor cobbler from Devonshire. Her life had been one of relentless hardship and poverty. She had traveled across England working as a servant, facing unemployment, hunger, and the bleak prospects afforded to a woman of her station in that era. The persona of Princess Caraboo was not born of malice, but of desperation, an act of sheer survival and a breathtakingly audacious attempt to escape a life of drudgery. In a society that showed kindness and fascination to a foreign princess but would have offered little more than scorn to a destitute vagrant, She had chosen to become the one person she knew they would not ignore. The fairy tale was over, and the reality, though far less glamorous, was in its own way even more remarkable. The public unveiling of the hoax sent a ripple of shock through British society. The reaction was a complex and contradictory mix of emotions. There was, undoubtedly, a sense of outrage and profound embarrassment among the elite who had so eagerly welcomed Caraboo into their homes and hearts. They had been made to look gullible and foolish, their sophistication undermined by a servant girl. Newspapers that had once breathlessly reported her every move now scrambled to cover the scandal of her exposure. Yet, intertwined with the ridicule and anger, there was an undeniable current of public admiration. Many common people saw not a malicious fraud, but a daring act of social rebellion. They were impressed by the sheer audacity, creativity, and nerve of a woman who had so brilliantly exposed the pretensions of the upper class by giving them exactly what they wanted to see. Mary Baker had held a mirror to society, and the reflection was both humorous and deeply revealing. What happened next to the woman behind the princess is one of the most surprising chapters of the story. In an age where forgery and deception were often met with harsh punishment, including imprisonment or transportation, Mary Baker's fate was remarkably lenient. The Worrells, perhaps feeling a sense of responsibility, or even a touch of pity and lingering amusement at the sheer scale of her deception, decided not to press charges. Instead, in a move that seems extraordinary to the modern mind, they facilitated her exit from the scandal. They arranged and paid for her passage to the United States, effectively giving her a fresh start and allowing the British press to lose interest. She spent approximately 7 years in Philadelphia, a period of her life shrouded in mystery, before returning to England. Settling in Bristol, she lived out the remainder of her days in stark contrast to her brief, dazzling fame. She married and had a daughter, and for years made a modest living by selling leeches to the Bristol Infirmary Hospital, a humble and gritty trade far removed from the palaces of Javasu. She died in obscurity at the age of 75, a forgotten woman whose true story was far more incredible than the fairy tale she had briefly lived. The enduring question, of course, is how she managed to pull it off. Her success was not a matter of luck, but a perfect convergence of time, place, and personality. The era was crucial. This was the post-Napoleonic War period in Britain, a time of burgeoning romanticism and intense fascination with the exotic Orient. The world was opening up, and tales of distant lands and cultures captured the public imagination. Mary Baker tapped directly into this cultural zeitgeist, offering a living, breathing embodiment of the mysterious other that so fascinated the British elite. Furthermore, her success hinged on a fundamental human truth. The people she deceived possessed a powerful desire to believe. The Worrells and their circle were not merely passive victims. They were active participants in the fantasy. They wanted to be the ones who had discovered and protected a noble savage, a genuine princess in distress. Their own vanity and preconceived notions of what was exotic and noble made them the perfect audience for her performance. They saw what they wanted to see, and Mary Baker, with uncanny skill, provided the script. Ultimately, the entire elaborate scheme rested on the unique qualities of Mary Baker herself. She was, by all accounts, a woman of remarkable intelligence, presence, and charisma. She was a keen observer of human nature, quickly learning how to mimic the manners of her betters, while strategically incorporating the exotic customs that would mark her as foreign. Her ability to invent a consistent language, religion, and set of customs on the fly points to a brilliant and improvisational mind. In a society that offered her no opportunities, she used her wit and dramatic talent to create her own. She wasn't just a liar, she was a performance artist whose masterpiece was her own identity, a testament to the power of a story so compelling that an entire nation was desperate for it to be true.